And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Our show today comes to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Tsimshian people. Many people wrongly assume hiking is a risk-free activity, and only when things go wrong do they quickly realize they need urgent help. If they aren't prepared for or equipped to get this help or to help themselves, there is a very sudden and real risk to this person's life. The conditions in the wilderness can change rapidly and dramatically, and what started as a fun day out in the mountains can soon turn into a life and death situation. On today's Open Connection, we open our archives to bring you this story from 2002.
It was the last weekend of August, and many area hikers decided to take one last trek up Mount Elizabeth near Kitimat, including two young people from the Lower Mainland, 20-year-old Christina Huckvale and 22-year-old Christopher Markov. When they didn't return that night, search and rescue crews were alerted, and their leader, Bob McLeod, got to work organizing what would turn out to be one of the largest search efforts ever in BC. A call for volunteers over local radio sparked an amazing response.
It started off initially as sort of a routine type search where people had gone off a trail or something, and very quickly escalated into a major effort, drawing in a lot of community resources, both from Kitimat and Terrace. We had 166 people from Kitimat and 71 out of Terrace that worked for it, through it, as well as all the other communities in the Northwest. And of course later we got people from throughout the province.
The terrain they had to cover was certainly not going to be easy, especially the higher elevations. The weather was also uncooperative, with low clouds and rain ruling out an aerial search in the early stages, and the rain washing away footprints that might help locate the missing hikers. But as the days wore on, the community response grew exponentially.
Initially it was family, friends, and members of Kitimat Search and Rescue that we got out, and then it very quickly became a community effort, with people from the Alcan plant were first and foremost out, and we had a lot of really strong outdoor people that showed up to help from them. And then it just became the community in general, and sort of a bit of a challenge every morning when you arrived on the scene with the muster point to find out how many people were there and then try and work out how you could best utilize them.
And the help was coming in not only from individuals, but also from local businesses, both large and small.
We just got a bunch of guys from the Alcan search and rescue crew, and just out here helping out, trying to do the best as we can. We went around to the back through a couple through the tree line path, just basically looking around, looking for tracks. Just calling out, doing the best that we can to help out.
Others helped by cooking meals for the searchers or running errands. And Kitimat's three major industries, Alcan, Eurocan, and Methanex, provided vehicles and logistical help, while they and TELUS made sure that helicopters were available to join in the search. The families of the missing hikers were overwhelmed.
On behalf of both of the families involved here, I'd like to express our sincere appreciation for the tremendous support we've gotten from the hundreds of volunteers we've had in the local area, all of the small businesses that have assisted us, and I guess most specifically our thanks to Alcan and TELUS and Eurocan. This area has just been phenomenal in its support of this effort, and we just wanted to express our heartfelt appreciation for all of the support we've had through this very tough ordeal.
Though rain hampered the search for its first few days, by midweek they managed to do several flyovers, joined by searchers from the Bulkley Valley and the Vancouver North Shore area. And on Thursday near noon, the body of Christina Huckvale was found at the bottom of a cliff.
As in most mountainous terrain, the weather moves in very rapidly. We surmised that she could have been in a fog situation or in a cloud situation. Wasn't aware of where she exactly was in relation to the trail, and just slipped.
At that point, searchers redoubled their efforts to find Christopher Markov, hoping against hope that he had somehow survived. However, the weather again turned treacherous. 4 highly trained searchers escaped disaster when they took cover behind some boulders as an avalanche swept past them. And as the weather deteriorated, hand searchers covered as much ground as they possibly could. The painful decision was finally made 8 days after the 2 hikers had first gone missing to call off the search.
Upon consultation with the Provincial Emergency Program, who coordinate the search and rescue, the extensive air and land search for Christopher Markoff has been officially stood down.
It would be more than 3 weeks before an 8-member recovery party, 4 from Terrace and 4 from the Lower Mainland, found Chris Markoff's body on the other side of the mountain from where Christina Huckvale died.
It was very difficult to express, but I think most people felt that it was a very good conclusion for the family. And I think that's what gave most of us satisfaction in terms of the search. It was very frustrating leaving it unfinished.
For these people who spend so much of their time and effort looking for those missing in our backcountry or waterways, the hope is that lessons can be learned so that this tragedy is not repeated.
I think as the part of the aftermath of it, and it's going to create an awful lot of community awareness and probably regional awareness that it's nice to get out in the backcountry and it's nice to do all these things, but you have to make darn sure you're careful. And not that these folks weren't careful, but they can be overtaken by weather. And you have to be prepared for that and make sure that you have a plan A and a plan B.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. It's called the roof of the world with good reason. The Tibetan Plateau stands over 3 miles above sea level. The remote area is home to a rich variety of cultures, from villages in Pakistan that practice various sects of Islam to the Buddhist communities of Tibet, now part of the People's Republic of China. Let us return to the archives with Isaac Sobel.
Tibet occupies the imagination of most Canadians as somewhere pretty exotic. Few of us have ventured into the mountainous territory ruled by China, but Isaac Sobel has come to know it well. He's back in Tibet right now on an annual humanitarian trip with the charity Rokpa International.
About 30 years ago, I met a Tibetan Lama who escaped from Tibet when the Chinese went in force, and he wound up at a meditation center in Scotland, and that's where I met him. He said at that time that if he ever had a chance to go back to Tibet, he would, and when he finally got a chance 20 years later, he found out that the people there were unbelievably poor, and they asked him over and over and over again for help. And that's why he started a charity that has set up now over 100 projects in Tibet. And I've kept in touch with him all these years, and when he told me that I'd have the opportunity to go do volunteer work in Tibet to help out those poor people, it was a natural thing to do.
Schooling orphaned children is Rokpa's largest mission, and this past spring, 2 of its best students made the journey of a lifetime to northwest British Columbia. In Prince Rupert, Selah and Chetsidroma were greeted at the Friendship House. The young women reciprocated with a song of their own. Sobel was eager to introduce the students to First Nations people in the Northwest. He says Tibetans and Canada's Aboriginal people have some common experiences politically and socially.
First Nations people are very aware of state-run discrimination against minorities, specifically them, and that's exactly what's happening in China at the moment. There's a similar push to assimilate all minority groups to be Chinese in a way. Now, the Chinese say that they are maintaining the individuality of minorities, and you'll see a lot of brochures about that. But basically, if you go to school in China, you study in Chinese language. You don't study in Tibetan.
There's the eagles, raven. These are all tribes, local tribes.
Selah and Chetsidroma and 4 other Tibetans spent 3 months in BC altogether studying English. Sobel was fascinated to hear what else they learned too.
One of the amazing answers was that they realized that money doesn't grow on trees, that people work really hard here for their money, and they also realized there were poor people in Canada as well, because all they'd ever seen are volunteers coming over, and their image was that we were all very wealthy, we could afford to take this trip, and maybe we just all were incredibly rich and didn't have to do much to get our money.
Still, most Tibetans can only dream of the standard of living enjoyed in Canada and our access to health care. In Terrace, along with a visit to UNBC, Chetsadroma was to have a gallbladder operation, courtesy of a local surgeon.
Tibet, if I had an operation in Tibet, they cut a big scarf. And here, I think, very small.
While it helps provide Western medicine in Tibet, Rokpa also encourages homegrown practices. Sela and Chetsadroma are studying traditional medicine.
We are in Tibet traditional medicine. The doctors are not using many machines. Just we check a patient's pulse, and look at the tongues, and look at the eyes, and look at the urine. Then we can see what problem in your body.
Sela and Chetsadroma are back in Tibet now, and Sobel is there too on his annual trip. With 3 other doctors and 4 other Canadians, one of them UNBC's Leslie King from Terrace, he's in Yushu, home to about 25,000 people.
From time to time, we unexpectedly are out on side trips, like a couple of years ago when we went 2 days by jeep and then 10 hours by horseback to a remote monastery where we interacted with the monks and villagers who probably had never seen Westerners. So we're always ready for surprises, but the focus of our trip will be in Yushu doing our free medical clinics.
Rokpa's projects in Tibet are run carefully in cooperation with local governments.
The one thing that we have to be very clear about is that our charity, it's called Rokpa, and when we go to Tibet, we're strictly non-political, and we are just a humanitarian organization. So that's something we have to be really clear about. If there was ever any thought that either our funding came from groups which supported Tibetan political movements or supported the Tibetan exile community in India, all of our projects would be closed down.
Sobel will return from Tibet in late October with more photographs and stories. By sharing them, he's hoping to forge closer ties between our region and the people of Tibet.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. According to the Government of Canada website, breast cancer is the most common cancer in Canadian women. 1 in 8 women are expected to develop breast cancer in her lifetime. In 2022, an estimated 28,800 Canadian women will be diagnosed with breast cancer. We return to the archives with Barb Campbell.
It was the day she found out that things started to change all around her. Barb Campbell is a breast cancer survivor and hero. She won't necessarily call herself one, but the status is clear to everyone around her. Doctors stress the importance of breast self-examinations, annual mammograms, and physicals, and Barb Campbell is one of the reasons why. Campbell says for the last 20 years she's practiced the self-exams, and for the last 10 has had the yearly x-ray. She says it wasn't until the mammogram results came in 2 years ago that doctors found an unusual shadow in the x-ray.
After some time, I actually had a biopsy done, and sure enough, it was malignant calcifications, and I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And that was actually in January of 2000 that I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
An extremely active person in the community and in her personal life, Campbell says it was a shock and disbelief to find out she had cancer. But from the support of friends, family, and co-workers, Campbell says she was able to overcome the news. She says her children put her thoughts into perspective by keeping up positive attitudes, and she says throughout her diagnosis and treatment, the Kitimat Haisla Nation played a big part in her recovery.
Their spirituality, their good wishes, their just being there. They were very, very good to me. My co-workers were very, very supportive. Everybody was very positive that I would come through this and do okay.
Campbell says when the time came, she chose to remove the cancerous tissue by mastectomy. She says the surgery was through her choice, and to this day believes it was definitely the right decision. But Campbell does admit she's one of the lucky ones. She says the cancer was caught early enough that doctors were able to do the mastectomy with a greater success rate.
Well, mine was such early diagnosis, and had it not been diagnosed from a mammogram, it may have been 4 to 5 years before I would have actually found a lump, and by then it could have been more aggressive.
After the surgery, Campbell felt it was time to give back some of the support and help she received. She's now an active peer support volunteer with the Canadian Cancer Society. Campbell says the service offers the kind of guidance and help that only a survivor can bring forward. She says the people she talks to like to compare notes and discuss the feelings that come with being diagnosed and dealing with cancer.
By calling the Canadian Cancer Society in Vancouver, they will match you up with someone who is of the same age, of the same diagnosis, the same everyday living experiences that are similar to yours, and that connection is made by telephones.
Meanwhile, Campbell says she'll still enjoy downhill skiing and attending her regular Rotary meetings. To her, this is all just a natural part of life. She's embracing the fact that life goes one day at a time, and she believes there's many happy days like this to come.
Other than that, hey, full bore ahead. I'm making the most of it.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Ecotourism is now defined as responsible travel to natural areas that conserves the environment, sustains the well-being of local people, and involves interpretation and education. In this final segment of Open Connection, we return to the archives with Bill K-Teen.
It was such a surprise for me when I moved here to Prince Rupert and saw some of the incredible jobs people here have. Like imagine spending your days watching whales.
We're Nova Scotian women.
Bill K-Teen has only been on this adventurous job for about 2.5 months, and already he's become quite hooked to it.
I've had my wife and a few of my friends out, and they keep telling me the same thing. They're like, I can't believe you get paid for this. This is such an excellent job. So I'm like, oh, I guess I never realized it because it's just kind of fun for me. So
it's also a job fun for just about everyone involved. Already in his short time at work, Bill says he's seen some pretty fascinating reactions from his passengers.
Oh, one lady almost dropped her camera one day. This whale came up right beside the boat, and then it blew right beside the boat, and she almost dropped her camera. She caught her camera like this. She was like totally freaked out. It's really cool.
Spending about 5 hours each day on the water, looking at and looking for the whales, is something Bill says he'll never get tired of.
It's a little bit different every day. It's not the same day. Every day is different, especially the whale watching. Every day is different. You never know what the whales are going to do. Sometimes they're jumping out of the water, and sometimes they're just really mellow and hanging out alongside the boat. But no, I don't think I'd change anything.
Trevor Pierce has been flying seaplanes in Prince Rupert for the past 25 years. And although there are challenges when flying in the bad weather, he says the beauty of it all really outweighs any challenges.
That's why I'm in Rupert 40 years. It is beautiful. And I'd like to make sure to emphasize that heavily to anybody out there. It's a nice place to come to. Yeah, we like it. We have the bad days, we have the good days.
It's fall, and along the banks of the Skeena River in the north of BC, swatches of colour are vivid indicators of the turning of the season. The fishing season is pretty much over. The early nets being cast now are by politicians looking to catch some votes. In many ways, this has been a banner year for fish out here on the west coast. Unlike the east coast, where there simply aren't any fish, out here that hasn't been a problem. A record 22 million sockeye returned to the Fraser River this year. Another record 4 million sockeye came to this river, the Skeena. So you'd think fishermen would be happy. Well, they're not. This is what they're unhappy about. This is a fish wheel, a machine for scooping fish out of the river, operated this past summer by the Gitxsan and Wet'suwet'en Aboriginal fishermen. Right. They're breaking it down for the winter. Until 2 years ago, it was illegal for natives to catch fish upriver and sell them. They could only catch what they could eat. Then the Tories brought in their Aboriginal fishery strategy. This past season, Kitsanawatsuwatan fishermen took more than 25,000 sockeye, not for sustenance, but for sale.
Aboriginal fishing strategy is working pretty good for the Gitxsan. We are here to stay. We have a long-term contract. We have taken over the enforcement of the river, and we have bigger plans, and our plans expand into markets into Europe and to Asia. So we feel that we are now a player. The monopoly is over. We're here to stay.
The native right to shellfish sprang from the Sparrow decision by the Supreme Court of Canada, which gave rise to a political solution.
Today I'm announcing a new and balanced regime for the BC fishery that will, over time, provide increased economic opportunities for the First Nations in BC.
But the Tories' Aboriginal fisheries strategy was a lot more progressive than most Conservatives were ready for, giving natives control over their own fishery. The first season was chaos. In the confusion, 500,000 Fraser River fish went missing and commercial fishermen went ballistic. This season, native fishermen were more tightly regulated, but critics still want the strategy scrapped. That demand is echoing in this election, with the Reform Party leading the charge.
Well, the Reform Party, of course, has already come down against the Aboriginal fishing strategy, and the reason for that is that we feel that we're loading the cost and the problem of the Aboriginal question onto the backs of commercial fishermen by doing that.
There is a lot of racism, and I think that parties, quite frankly, like the Reform Party, are playing on that racism. I think that the old line parties essentially understand. They've been around long enough to understand that they cannot push back Aboriginal rights. And the NDP and the Conservatives and the Liberals, they know full well that they can't throw out stuff like the Aboriginal fishery strategy.
The fishing issue isn't just about allocation, about who gets to catch the fish and when. It's also about what happens to the fish once they've been caught. That's where you get into a debate about sovereignty and about jobs. The NDP has staked out its position against free trade. Here in Prince Rupert, 2,000 people work as shore workers processing fish. Yet two Canadian companies, BC Packers and Ocean Fish, are building a new plant to the north, in Alaska. There are fears that will cost Canadian shore workers their job.
This plant may be closed. This plant closes because British Columbia fish is going to be canned in Alaska. That's just a travesty, and we need...
For which Joy Thorkelson blames free trade.
Well, I think that what it means is that we're just going to lose jobs in Canada, and one of the things that free trade deal has been about is saying that we have to work equal to other workers in the world. And so if there's going to be competition, the competition starts to be between workers. Who can work for less?
Whichever party wins next week will also have to wrestle with the complaints of sports fishermen. They claim that, the occasional coho notwithstanding, too few fish are being sent their way.
10 pounds.
But the hot issue remains the Aboriginal fishery, and the government that settles that issue will be the government that settles native land claims once and for all.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind and heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.